What's good, everybody? My guest today is Tom Salah. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Sales at SmartBear, which offers automation, development, and monitoring tools to build better software and applications. Tom, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
Jay, what's happening? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And actually, for context, before we learn a little bit more about you, Tom, just for the audience. So Tom and I met a couple of weeks ago at a Stage 2 Capital networking event. And, we were outside just talking and having a conversation and got to know him, learned that he was the VP of Senior Vice President of Global Sales at SmartBear, and asked him to be on the podcast. And one of the things that I noticed about Tom, which we'll get into in a minute, is that he seemed very quickly, to me anyways, as someone who could execute, right? Like I was talking to him about his travel at SmartBear when he was on the road or wherever he is, and even commuting in from his home into the office. He never, he always starts his day with a workout, and that could be somewhere out of the country at a hotel that he's never been at before or wherever. He starts his day the same, which got me thinking about habits and execution. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit today is habits. But Tom, again, welcome to the Goats of Growth, and tell us a little bit about SmartBear, your role there, and then we'll get into what I just alluded to.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate the kind words in the introduction. But yeah, SmartBear is all about helping companies improve the quality of their software. We span, our product portfolio spans the entire software development lifecycle. Our sweet spot is software testing and test automation, but we have post-deployment monitoring tools as well as front-end code or back-end code development tools as well. I've been with SmartBear this summer. I'll come up on it will be 9 years. I started as an IC and now head up the entire global organization with teams globally dispersed, headquarters here in Somerville, and teams in Galway, Ireland, as well as Melbourne, Australia, which, as you alluded to, was a recent trip of mine. So excited to be here and dive into some of the topics.
Thanks for that. And I would imagine that, first of all, it's unusual, and I'm sure to be with a company as long as you have, right? 9 years, a high growth company, presumably a high pressure, I'll just say high pressure, high growth environment that has a lot of expectations of its team and of its people. And as you alluded to, you started off as an individual contributor. And I want to get into what I alluded to a bit earlier about your ability to execute. And in particular, I think the baseline of execution is really about habits and daily habits. And I alluded to one, of course, which is exercising daily. But talk to me a little bit about where you developed, what your daily habits look like, and how you developed them over the years.
Yeah, sure. So, I think I'm certainly an individual of routine. In establishing habits and standards for myself first, both personally as well as professionally. So just, giving you a sense of a day in the life. As we had previously discussed, very early riser. I have my mental release at the gym in the morning. Like to be at my desk by 7:30, so I can set the tone for my organization. In the form of, it's typically an email communication, but we have many morning stand-ups as well. And just really set that tone before 8 o'clock in the morning. I just find if you as a leader show your team, they're more likely to adopt those standards and those and those habits that are going to set them up for long-term success as well.
And why is that so important? In other words, you say get your day started before 8 a.m. and then also by doing so and by showing your ability to stick to a habit, a good habit, so to speak, and to execute. Obviously, others are going to follow. But why is that so important? Why why is starting early so important? Why is that a good habit, at least for your team and the culture there?
Well, I'd answer the question. I think it's a two-part question. So first, I think establishing habits early eliminate the distractions that are inevitable throughout the day of just being a human being and going about your day. There's always unpredictability in a day, but by starting early, you can control, right, your priorities, and you can control those habits that are going to help set you up for the day. And then the second part, of the question is making sure that you appreciate that consistent habits snowball into much bigger, right, results. And I think people can be at their best daily and periodically, but the people who are really leaning into the consistency of a habit are the ones who really accelerate their career. And I would certainly attribute some of my habits and the consistency of delivering on those habits to the success that I've had both as a professional, but also just as an individual and as I've continued to grow.
Is it safe to assume that your rest of your day is structured as well? In other words, by 10 o'clock, I want to have this done. By 10 o'clock, by noon, we need to have this done, or I need to have met with this group of people, or just walk me through what the rest of the day looks like, or if it's structured, or maybe it's not structured. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I am a routine guy, Jay, as I said, but I think I'd be lying if I said that my structure is consistent day to day. So I really lean into structuring my day and try to maximize my energy for my really important tasks, right? So utilizing that mental energy, the space on my calendar, when I know my mental energy is going to be really strong. With that said, as an operator, right, it requires me to be very adaptable and adjust in real time and prioritize in real time. So there's a component of that. But when you really lean into the structure, it makes the operational adjustments a little bit easier to handle. And just keep operationally driving the business forward.
Yeah, I find that myself too as well, which is that I feel like if there's, call it, train tracks or whatever, right? Where I have these two sides of the track, so to speak, right? And I know to go from point A to point B, call it the beginning of the day to the end of the day as an example, right? And there's overall structure there. I think what I heard you say is that with that overall structure that you have in terms of mental energy, which I want to get into in a minute, you're able to adapt and be comfortable with adapting without necessarily being overstressed about it, because you know that by the end of the day, so to speak, right? Like the big thing is still the big thing, right? In other words, you still have that structure where you can come back to continue on whatever deliverable, whatever thing you want to execute by the end of the day. Is that fair to say? Or maybe I'm mischaracterizing.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think if you want to, as an individual, if you're, if you aspire to continue to grow and to learn, right, then you need to get off those tracks, right? You need to be willing to deviate from those tracks. Now, you want the tracks to serve as a guide, right, to deliver on your important tasks, right? But you have to be willing to step aside and go to uncomfort zones, which some people, can mean a number of different things to different people, right? But a lot of people are unwilling to go to those uncomfortable zones to solve problems. And that's why, sales isn't for everyone. That's not why operating, in a high velocity business and a high stressful job isn't for everyone. But if you come to terms with the reward, right? And it kind of comes back to those standards that you set for yourself, right? If you have those standards and those standards are bigger picture standards, then when you deviate, right, you'll be able to ask yourself, hey, I'm getting a little off track here, but am I still delivering, on my standard, right? On my goal of the, for the organization and for myself.
Yep, that makes sense. Mental energy, something that I am constantly exploring myself because the day does change, especially when, obviously me, I'm running my own business and I'm wearing a lot of hats.
Mm-hmm.
And as I talk to you about it offline, I look at my calendar every Sunday and try to figure out where I'm going to have the mental energy, so to speak, to do certain things. Right. And a lot
Sure.
of it is, I know I'm most creative in the morning, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I say most, I'm talking like early when I wake up from like 6 to 9 a.m. Call it right.
Yep.
I know that this is a good time for me to do interviews. This between this and say 4 p.m. or something like that, right? Where I'm engaging people and I have the energy to do it. I've already exercised, I've already brain dumped, and I've got creative and those types of things.
Sure.
For you, I wonder, does your mental energy change on a daily basis? For instance, I know you exercise every morning. Do
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, even if you don't feel like exercising, you're like, you know what, I got to do it anyways because this is the thing? Or do you move it? And I guess more broadly, how do you adapt if your mental energy changes from day to day or week to week?
Yeah, I honestly, I think each day my mental energy is like typically falls in certain windows that I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
accustomed to. In terms of your question regarding like the workout, I have a workout every day. I just that's who I am. I think my
Mm-hmm.
wife laughs at me sometimes about not taking a day off, but it just is my release. And
Mm-hmm.
even when I'm not feeling up to it on a particular day, what motivates me is what is the alternative, right? Well, I could be crippled, or I could, next week I could come down with something that prohibits me from being able to work out. And if I didn't have, right? So there's always things in life, right, that can be thrown your way that take something that is of a lot of meaning to you, and working out is of a lot of meaning to me, right? So if I'm so fearful that that would be taken away, that
Mm-hmm.
that drives me in times where I'm like, asking or negotiating with myself about whether or not to take a day off. In terms of the mental energy throughout the day, and how that relates to the week, I have a structure like we've talked about, and I know that like I'll have certain mental energy blocks throughout the day that I need to really capitalize on. One that I like
Mm-hmm.
that I've communicated to my team is, hey, I like coffee. I know I'm going to have an afternoon coffee, right? So I know that like at 2 o'clock when I pour my afternoon coffee, like I'm gonna have good mental energy from 2 to call it 4 o'clock each day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where maybe I need to separate from the operations of the business and really lean in to the important tasks, right, that require next level of focus, maybe that aren't giving me results that day or that week, right? But I've capitalized on that mental energy window that I have on that particular day to start working on those important tasks that drive some of the more strategic, longer term initiatives that I'm working on.
When you say next level focus, give me an example of what next level focus means for you.
For me, I mean, being an operator, being in the business day to day, I think the next level focus is just separating myself from all the urgent tasks that are coming across the desk. Being in sales, right? That could mean, hey, getting on a call with with an attorney for an agreement, or approving a discount, or specific terms, or jumping on a customer call, right? Like these are all urgent things, or answering a question related to a particular employee, or whatever it may be, right? That's required of me as being a senior leader and senior, and an operator within SmartBear.
Mm-hmm.
But the next level focus is removing from that operational requirement, right? And for me, in many cases, that means closing my email, shutting down Slack, just opening up, opening up Word or Excel, depending on what I'm working on, right? And just really, really focusing on the task at hand to make sure that I'm putting my best work and best foot forward.
Do you time box at all? In other words, or I'm not even sure that's the right word, time box, but or maybe even time block, where it's like, maybe you answer email between a certain period of time a day, and then to your point, shut those notifications down, go into deep focus, come out of deep focus, answer email, Slack messages, whatever again, go back and do you have that kind of a
I
daily thing that you
do,
have?
right? I do, but I also understand that there are going to be things in each day that are gonna, that are going to adjust it, and I'm okay accepting that as long as I
Mm-hmm.
make a commitment to myself at the end of each day to ask, hey, did I handle the high priority items today? Right? Do I feel like I've moved my business forward today? So as long as I have that like pressure check for myself each day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm okay that if I deviate a little bit from the schedule that I set out on that particular day, if I deviate, it's okay, right? And I think for your audience, I think it's important, like as a rep or as a frontline manager, to make sure that you're okay with that as well, right? You want to structure your day so that you have a guideline, right? You have those rails, right? That that you need to do, you want to drive on, but recognizing that there are going to be things that happen throughout the day, right? That bring you off course, right? As long as you have a time set aside to assess, your performance on that particular day over the course of the week, and then quarterly, I always encourage more check-ins than not with my teams. Is I feel as though that check-in will help you determine, right? Hey, I brought value to the business today, or I didn't. And if you didn't, then adjust, right? Hey, now my priorities the next day differ from the previous day because, if I'm a rep, like I didn't create the opportunity. I didn't hit my metrics yesterday because, I was fighting some fires, right? Or a frontline manager, like my team, underperformed for a week or a quarter, right? I need to really reprioritize based off, the results of that last time period.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I just wrote down when you were talking about that is challenges equal mental energy. And the reason I wrote that down is because, when you're facing a challenge, like not getting a task done or executing on a particular day, or, maybe for some reason the numbers are short. I wonder if there's a correlation there to what we just talked about, which is mental energy. In other words, sometimes I feel like if I'm not getting enough accomplished, or I'm not doing what or staying on track. That's why I stop and look at the calendar and say, okay, well, where is my mental energy going to be the strongest, so that I can really execute at a high level the best that I can. And I wonder, as you manage your team, because one of the things that I feel like is challenging as a leader is scaling yourself, if you will,
Sure.
right? Like you started off
Talk
as an
about it every
individual
day.
contributor.
We talk about it
Okay,
every day within my leadership team.
there you go, right? And so you were a fantastic individual contributor, right? You're a fantastic leader, like frontline manager, a fantastic, second line major or leader, or third line leader. And the thing about that is that how do you then, to what we just said, scale that to your team? And we're here talking about habits, we're talking about mental energy. And I wonder, how do you best sort of extract the best, right, out of your people, so that they are always operating at their best, right? Their highest level. So you said you talk about it every day. Bring me inside that. Like, what are the challenges, and how are you solving it, and how have you solved for it to the
Yeah, so I
degree that you
think
can?
I think I'll call a spade here and just say it is hard, right?
Yeah.
It is very, very hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I believe as though if you have the standards top of mind based off the
Mm-hmm.
priorities that are going to get you the results, that is that helps keep you on course, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, like, let's just say you're, one of our standards is high activity within my sales organization, right? Like each day we're asking ourselves, are we delivering high activity. I mean, it's a sales, we're in sales, right? So we know that typically high activity will lead to results, right? Like that's the top, that's the leading indicator for our success, right? So we have to look at that and say, okay, well, if our activity is falling off, then probably, the pipe creation is falling off, then the closed won, and then obviously the money in the pocket, the money that we're making is falling off, right? So that's just one example of coming back to the standard and asking yourself, right, are you performing against that standard? And I think as leaders, we want to challenge our teams, right, to think above and beyond the standards, right? Not at the expense of overwork or burnout, but what it could mean if you're pushing yourself a little bit more to be great, right? And then within leadership, as you scale up, as you're alluding to, like frontline leaders to second line or third line leaders, right? Putting an intentional focus on the process, right? And how you scale that process is so critical to scaling yourself, right? You have to recognize that you can't be part of every call. You can't be part of every meeting. It's okay to say no, right? And it's hard as you move up the ranks to be able to do that. But if you focus on scalable process, also a big part of the process is consumable process, right? And you follow up with that process, right? It's going to put you in the best position, kind of coming back to the calendar, right? To make sure that each day your calendar has a balance of high priority, important items, as well as the operational time that you need to drive the business forward.
You mentioned consumable process. Give me an example. What do you mean when you say consumable?
Something that's easy to understand, right? I think a lot of people over-engineer process. What we try to do within our leadership team is just make it very consumable, right? Black and white. Don't overthink it. Try the process. If we need to make adjustments, we're not going to get it right first time around, right? But recognizing that simplified process, clear process, and continuous follow-up and continuous check-in and for feedback allows you to adjust and iterate on that process over time to hopefully get that process more efficient and be able to scale it maybe outside of your business unit to other business units company-wide.
Let me just follow up on that again real quick. Do you have, and if you don't, that's okay, maybe we can come back to it.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, but you have a example of a particular consumable process that you're, in your part of, I guess, your playbook right now, or something historically that you've said, here's an example.
Yeah, I mean, just for your audience, I think it's important. I'll use an example of like a sales campaign that we're doing, right? And I think a lot of time for us, right, we try to simplify the campaign so that a lot of automation helps drive the simplicity of the process. So in other words, like one example is you're going to get this lead list. You're going to upload that lead list into Outreach. The campaign is set already in Outreach. There are templates built in Outreach that allow you to deliver, at scale to those customers. There's a level of personalization that's required, right? And then having those, it may be a weekly, bi-weekly meetings to check in on progress and make sure that you understand, is the plumbing and the electrical working, right? Or are there pieces of the process that are broken, right? So we put a lot of thought into how we can make that process consumable.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Yep, that's fantastic. I want to come back to energy for a moment.
Sure.
Because again, it's something that fascinates me. Do you have any tools in your tool belt to help you manage that with your team? And what I mean by that is that as a leader, right? When you're sitting down in
Yep.
your one-on-ones, or maybe even a group, and you notice that there are deficiencies, right? There's something that's just not working as well as it could, right? I wonder how deep you get into this particular aspect of it. In other words, and I wonder how many other leaders do, or how many people in general do, right? Where you're managing someone and you're saying, okay, well, maybe there's an underlying issue here, right? And some of the underlying issues could be personal, right? Challenges and who knows, right? All kinds of stuff. Could be health issues. They didn't get enough sleep. Maybe they stopped drinking coffee and they're not using caffeine anymore, right? And all of a sudden that's just affecting their performance, right? But at the end of the day, I feel like it all does really come down to your sort of your energy, right? Your reason for wanting to do something and do it or being able to do something at a high level. Do you, like we talked about with our own calendars, sort of help and sit down with your leaders, your managers or directors and say, hey, you know what, maybe if we just sort of shifted this around where you have your meetings in the morning as opposed to the afternoon. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get at there? Like, how much do you get into that?
Yeah, I think what I heard you saying first really was about using your intuition to assess the people that you're interacting with every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think uh, not enough is said about using intuition in leadership and recognizing that there's opportunities every day to make an impact on the people you're working with, right? And sitting
Mm-hmm.
down with those people in real time. People are your number one priority. They're the every company's most important aspect. Great people build great companies. Like it is what it is. Like I would argue to my grave that those aren't true. Those two
Mm-hmm.
statements.
Yeah.
But being willing to spend the time with the individual to understand, right, what's going on, like really simply put, like what is going on, what that, to me, it shows that you care personally about colleagues, right? And I think once you've shown that and shown your commitment to really learning about the people inside your organization and really across the company, right? How they think, how they talk, how they interact with people. Like if you fully understand that, right, and care about them personally, then that's going to make for a much more productive working relationship. Um, that's how I like to approach it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I mentioned tools. I was alluding to tools. And the reason I brought up tools is because for me, when I'm so I consider myself a creative person. I consider myself with, an idea a minute, right? Where I got to just, here's an idea, let's run with it. And if I'm sitting there communicating with somebody might be agreeable in that moment. And I'm getting vibes that they understand what I'm saying. And then maybe the next day when I follow up on it, and they're like, "Hey, did you do that thing? Remember I thought?" And they're like, yeah, no, I wasn't really sure if you wanted me to get that started now or you wanted me to get that started, in a couple of days or whatever." And I use this thing called an impact filter, which basically outlines the top level thing that I want to get done, and then the pluses and minuses for, here are the positives if it gets done. Here are the minuses if it doesn't get done. And here's an example of what it looks like at its highest level, right? Like here are the 5 or 7 or 8 things that if these are all true, this is going to be a phenomenal experience, right?
Sure.
Do you use anything like that in the way that you communicate or disseminate information, or is it just sort of more less structured, I guess, if you will, and more just sort of what you were saying in terms of intuition, just sort of one-on-one feeling?
Jay, you're way ahead of me in terms of the tooling and the structure and approach that you have to those.
Yeah.
The way I approach it today is real time follow up. Right. I fully believe in the power of the follow up, and I think it's important to make sure that follow up is done pretty immediate following the discussion. Now that's
Mm-hmm.
challenging, right? Because as leaders, you're moving from one, you're frequently context switching, right? But if you live in the moment and take notes on, what it is that's being discussed, then that's going to put you in a better position to be able to follow up at least by the end of the day, or first thing the next morning, on the topics that were discussed, to make sure that there isn't any blind spots, and that everyone, if it's a one-on-one, you and that person or everyone on the team is aligned.
How do you help folks? You mentioned blind spots. How do you help people identify their blind spots, and in a way where you're doing it by building confidence still, right? In other words, it's not a blind spot where you're sort of pointing at them and saying you suck, but you're identifying blind spots for them and coaching them the way that's positive. And then obviously we all have our own blind spots, as we talked about offline. Tell me about some of those for you, and how you actually address your own blind spots.
So in order to help an individual identify their blind spots, you need to understand their why. You need to understand what it is that they're essentially after, right? And if you, just as an example, you're talking to, you're a frontline manager, right? And you want to be a director, right? Um, if that's the ultimate goal for you, right, and that's your why right now, right, and that's your why right now, then I, as a senior leader, can help you identify what it takes to be successful as a director. At SmartBear, my directors manage managers. That isn't always the case depending on the organization, right? But now, what is it that frontline manager is doing today, right, that may prohibit that person from becoming a director, right, and managing managers? So you can identify the blind spots for the individual if you understand their why and what it is that they're after.
Yeah, that's great. What was your why as you started moving from one individual contributor to frontline manager to director
My
to?
why has always been to lead my own company. So I want to be a CEO. That's my aspiration. And why I want to be a CEO is because I want to have greater social and economical impact, within the community, and more broadly speaking, within society.
I was grinning there because I was going to go all Simon Sinek on you and ask you why that's your why. and we could probably keep exploring that, like why do you want to have social impact and all that. But
Yeah,
I'll stop
we
there.
might need another half hour or so if we're going to get down into that level of depth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, for sure. I'm gonna have to bring you back for like a part one B, I guess, if you will. Um, Let me ask you. You're obviously, you've, like we said, you've been there for 9 years. You moved from individual contributor to now senior vice president of global sales.
Yep.
Um, where were your blind spots as you were moving from one position to another? And then how did you identify? How did you make them or improve upon them? In other words, were there mentors? Did you have individual coaching within SmartBear that helped you? Because obviously, when you get from one position into a position that you haven't held before, they're going to be naturally blind spots. You're not going to know what you know. You're not going to know what you don't know until you actually learn it. So, talk to me
Sure.
about that for people who are making those transitions.
I My guidance would be to act like you're in the role, that next role, while you're in your existing role, right? And
Mm,
understanding what it makes, what that next role it requires to be successful, right?
mm,
So if you think of, some real world examples of moving from, manager to director, right? Like typically in a director role, like you're going to have stronger cross functional relationships. You're going to have stronger process that can scale, right? You're going to have to be very focused on talent development and stronger communication skills. If you're going from director to VP, like how are you influencing different objectives within inside different functions, right? So making sure that you have an understanding of the objectives within marketing, within FP&A, within HR, product, etc., and really showing that you're a true partner to those different functions, and that comes with growth, right? Is having both internal and external people to help you vet out some of those blind spots. So, if I come back to answer the question specifically for myself, I approached it in three ways. I said, I need internal people that I can go to vet ideas off of what's going to make me successful in that next role. I need to have external mentors, which I have several. That's how I got introduced to stage two, to be honest. Vet the ideas off external, and then self-education, right? There's so much good literature out there. I mean, I'm a big advocate for self-education through books, podcasts, and listening to, people like yourself, right? Make me better, right? Through some of your guests and their experiences. There's just, I mean, if you're willing to invest in those three areas, I feel like it's going to put you in the best position, not only to take the next step in your career, but succeed in that next step.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important too as well is to, listen to the people who are operating in in the world that exists today, right? I think that's one of the shortcomings of books that may have been written 10, 20 years ago, depending on, some of them are timeless, obviously. I think Good to Great in a lot of ways can be timeless, but some of them aren't. But one of the things I love about this podcast is interviewing operators like you and others that are actually solving today's problems, and actually even in looking in the near future, right, over the next 3 months, 6 months, a year. Like, what information do I have today, and what challenges do I see coming up that I can help solve for through all this? Internal mentors and people, external mentors and people, and in self-education. As you look at go ahead. You're going to say.
Well,
something.
I was just going to say, it's like when you talk to internal people, right? They're going to have a lot, like the context is something you're familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. It's inside the walls. Like you understand some of the challenges that are happening when you go external, right? Then you can start banging some of those, or not even banging, vetting some of those internal challenges against companies, outside of the walls of your company, right? Are these mm-hmm. challenges you're facing? How are you guys handling them, right? And I think the last 3 years has been a forum, or has been an environment that has made that so critical, right? When we think of the whole return to office concept, in hybrid work, that's a big one. That no one seems to have, the right answer on, right? But the right answer for your company may not be the right answer for another company, and vice versa, right? Yep. So if you keep vetting those ideas off, it's going to put you in a better position to make the right decision for you and your company in that moment. And then the books, like you referenced, like some of them, were written 10, 20, even longer, many years ago. But there's still a lot of core competencies that can teach you about organizational health, and building great teams that I think really are timeless.
Yeah, for sure. The Qualified Sales Leader behind me there by John McMahon is one of them. Sales Acceleration Formula, which I think might have been an audible for me by Mark Roberge, or two. Certainly that I will feel can live forever.
Well, I mean, many of the things in the Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon, right? He dives into in the Revenue Builders podcast, right? Like right. Now he brings, similar to your format, he brings in operators and now he's starting to vet some of the ideas, right? Him and Kaplan yes. are vetting ideas off one another about, hey, this is how we built this program. This is how, I did things at Blade Logic or whatever, back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of it is relevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other of it just provides some perspective to today's environment, right? And that
Yeah.
helps
Yep.
you more informed, or make more informed decisions.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. As all right, so as you look at the next role, right, for
Yep.
you, where do you see your blind spots? First of all, define the next role for me, and then where do you see your blind spots there, and how are you,
Yeah, my next my
operating?
next my next role would be CRO.
Okay.
So that's the natural next step for me, on my quest to become a CEO someday.
And where presumably, given what you said a few minutes ago, you're doing some of the things or looking at some of the things that a CRO would be doing, right? You're starting to put yourself in that particular position, right?
Yep.
So tell me about that. Where are the blind spots, and then how are you starting to shore those up so that you're going to be ready when you get the call?
Yeah, I believe the the blind spots that I'm really focused on right now is the cross functional partnerships, right? And just understanding the challenges, the dynamics, the objectives of all the different functions within inside an organization. So typical is like HR or human capital, like people, product, and engineering, right, and how they tick, as well as FP&A, so finance, operations, and really just getting into the depths of their challenges, their objectives, right? So I can be a partner to them as a hopefully someday as a CRO, and as an executive.
One thing I want to touch upon a little bit, and you mentioned it probably 10 minutes ago or so, as it pertains to moving from one position to another and thinking about your next role, is talent development,
Yep.
right? And all this becomes much easier, this executing and scaling and really building a business, when you have the right talent, right? When you have the right people around you. I want to put this in the context of your leaders, right? Your the people that are reporting to you. As you look at and identify talent, call it the next director, or maybe it's a manager who wants to
Yep.
be a director or the direct. What are some of the core competencies that you look for in those people, either that you want to see new in your team, or people that you want, or things that you want to see even improved on the people that you work with on a daily basis?
So I'll answer the question in two parts. I think first and foremost, I am a huge advocate for leadership development. I when we talk about energy, like that's where I'm most energetic, right? Is when I'm working with my leaders, right, to develop one another, right? They can help me
Mm-hmm.
develop, I can help them develop, and we do
Mm-hmm.
that in three ways at SmartBear. One, we do it through informal LinkedIn learning and leadership development roundtables and lunch and learns. So, as an example, we had one yesterday on ruthless prioritization, right? We sat around the table, we watched a couple videos, and we just talked about it, right? Hey, how do you apply this? How do you do this, etc. Second is learning our learning and development function here internally. Like, what are they doing to help us, right, through a more programmatic approach? And then finally, potentially, we've brought in external consultants to help with the leadership development, with a more again, a kind of higher level theory based approach. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a three pronged approach, to our leadership development. And then the second part of your question is, it really just brings me back to people are every company's most important asset, right? And recognizing that, one, you have to develop those people, so which I just talked about, but then also, like, what is it that you're looking for, right? Which I think was the question that you were asking. Like, what are those questions? I mean, the three most important attributes to me are resilience, accountability, and coachability.
Resilience, accountability, and coachability. And I would imagine that when you're thinking about those resilience, accountability, and coachability, they're important, obviously, for obvious reasons, I suppose, right? Because things aren't always going to be easy.
Sure.
You need to be accountable, and we talked about that in terms of habits and those types of things. And you just talked about LinkedIn Learning, around ruthless prioritization.
Yep.
You have a learning and development team. You have external consultants. If you're investing all that time and energy, frankly, into developing people, and they're not coachable, then that's not going to work either. So I appreciate that for sure.
I think the coachability is the ex-athlete in me, right? And just really trying to like get better every day, right? And hey, I'm not showing up for to practice every day to just go through the motions, right? I want to improve. If I can improve on one thing each day, that's going to put me in the best position to be the best, baseball, hockey, football, whatever sport it is I'm playing each day.
Yep. What did you play? Were those the three sports that you played?
I played football, baseball, hockey, and golf. So
football, baseball, hockey, and golf.
Yeah.
And one of those, I would imagine, is in the same season, though. So golf and baseball in the same season, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. You had to manage your time early in life, not just now.
Yeah, I mean, I think why so many. Again, I'm somewhat biased towards athletes, but I mean, there's plenty of great non-athletes, but you see a lot of really good operators, who are ex-athletes because it gives you good structure, right? Used to having structure, both in the early days, right, of playing little league or whatever it was, right, in youth sports, but also through high school and having that routine, right, and then through college. The routine is something that you can always lean back on.
And it goes back to the three core competencies you just mentioned as well. Resiliency, you're not always going to win. Accountability, you have to be accountable to your teammates, to the coaches, to all of those kinds of things, let alone yourself. And then, of course, coachability as well. So I appreciate that for sure.
Bang.
You ready?
Exactly.
Yep, that's right. You ready for the easy part, the rapid fire 5?
Oh, geez. Oh, here we go. No, well, I'm ready as I ever will be. So fire away.
There you go. Number 1, what motivates you?
My biggest motivation is my family and being able to provide for my family.
Name a big goal you have right now and when you would like to accomplish it, personally or professionally.
Big goal for me is to be a CRO, and I'm hoping to accomplish that as soon as possible.
What's your most preferred way to learn new information?
Podcast.
All right. How many hours of sleep do you average per night?
7.5.
Do you use anything, by the way, like Whoop or some other wearable technology?
I don't, but my friends are trying to get me to get the Whoop. I haven't made the switch yet.
I'm probably going to make it really soon. I saw some post on LinkedIn about it towards the end of last year, and I was thinking about getting the the Aura ring, but I have my wedding ring, and I don't want, frankly, to wear any more rings besides my wedding ring. And I take this on and off because it just feels like it's I don't know. And then I have like a Garmin watch that, I don't know, for some reason I just don't like it. And I don't think that the sleep, to your point, I don't know if the sleep thing is as accurate. Some of the stuff just doesn't seem as accurate, like stress levels. I'm like, there's got to be some better solution. So I heard Whoop was pretty good. So I think that might be something.
Well, if you do try it, report back. I want to get your feedback.
I will. I'll screenshot the analytics and everything for you too. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
Well, like I said, family's first for me. So I like to spend time with, I got a young family. So my son and my wife. Um, but in terms of like, selfish, I would like to be on the golf course.
Love it. 11 months, right? Is that how old your son is?
15.
Oh, 15 months. Okay.
15,
Wow.
yeah.
15.
Number two coming in 6 weeks. So
That
um,
is
exciting
awesome.
time.
He's walking, I'm assuming, at this point, right? 15 months.
He's high energy. We need to get him. We need to get him talking.
Yeah, there you go.
Then
Maybe
we
you
can
don't. I don't
then we
know.
get the headset on him.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I'll interview him. Uh, bonus time. Bonus question is from my last guest. Very simply, how many times do you post on LinkedIn every week?
I don't post on LinkedIn weekly. I probably post on LinkedIn once a month, a couple times a quarter or so.
Okay. What question would you like me to ask my next guest?
What was what was the most challenging situation, and how did you overcome it?
What was your most challenging situation and how did you overcome it? Circling that word, resiliency. Love it.
Yes,
I would imagine that may be something you might ask on an interview as one of
love
your
that question.
potential leaders.
Love that interview question.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One last question,
Yep.
which would be how can folks reach out to you to say thank you, perhaps ask another question that I didn't ask? Maybe they want to be a part of the SmartBear team. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's best um, to communicate.
And make sure that you mention that you heard him on the Goats of Growth so that you can stand out in his inbox or somehow get his attention, tell him how fantastic a job he did, because he did. Tom Salah, Senior Vice President of Global Sales at SmartBear. I appreciate it. Tom, don't go anywhere. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience, and you and I will wrap up after that. So goodbye, everybody. I'm going to stop saying cueing the music because there is no music actually after the episode anymore. It's just me ending. So I will say this. Don't forget to check out Customer Conversations. The link will be in the show notes, where I am now interviewing buyers of technology, starting with Rev Tech and HR Tech. And I'll be interviewing them about how they make their buying decisions, their decision criteria, and everything in between. $9 a month, $49 a year. I'm building it in public, so give me your feedback. If you think that is not worth a dime, let me know. If you think it's worth 10 times that, let me know. And if you love it, make sure you tell everybody else. All right, everybody. I'll see you on the next episode.